agent with the FBI. I'm assigned to FBI headquarters, but I sit in Rock Hill, South Carolina.
All right, and specifically, what are your job duties in Rock Hill, South Carolina?
Right now, I supervise 5 full-time agents and about 17 part-time folks in my unit, the Cellular Analysis Survey Team.
Okay. And explain to the jury what the Cellular Analysis Survey Team is.
So the Cellular Analysis Survey Team, or CAST, is a group of about 80 special agents and task force officers. We're all across the country, and what we specialize in is analyzing historical phone records, specifically the location data associated with those.
All right. And is that something that you do personally in your job?
It is.
Okay. And explain just a little more. I know we'll get more when we get into your report, but what do you mean when you analyze cell phone location data? What are you doing when you do that?
So what I'm doing is I'm looking at the call detail records. These records are very much like the old paper phone bill we all got in the mail maybe 10, 15 years ago. They have the date, they have the time that the calls occurred, they tell me who called who, so if I made a phone call or somebody called me, those numbers are listed on there. They have the duration of the call. The major difference between the old paper phone bill we all got in the mail and the records I look at is the records I look at have a cell tower, so they tell me which cell phone tower was used to handle that call, and then they tell me which side of that tower was used to handle the call. So what I do is I take that cell tower information, I can compare it to a list of all the cell phone towers for that carrier, whether it be Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T. And then I can take that date, time, and general location from the cell phone records, and I can compare it to a known date, time, and location. So most of the time when law enforcement's investigating a crime, they generally know what date, time, and location that incident occurred.
Okay. And as part of your cell phone analysis, do you also take location data directly from phones, if available, and plot that as well?
I can do that, yes, sir. So when law enforcement downloads a phone, it comes in a big report, and there's a location data section on there, and I can also I can analyze and map that data as well.
And how long have you been doing this cell phone analysis?
Part-time since 2012, full-time since about late 2016.
All right. And have you undergone any training to help learn cell phone location analysis?
I have over 400 hours of training. In 2012, I went to a course called Basic Project Pinpoint, where it was 3 days. We learned how to read the records, compare the records to a tower list, and generate a very basic map. I used that technique in every one of my cases from 2012 until 2016. In 2016, I attended Advanced Project Pinpoint, which was a week-long course. And during that course, we took a deeper dive into the different types of records we can get from the carriers and how to use them. At the conclusion of that course, I was selected to go to the CAST certification course. At that time, it was 4 weeks. The first week being training on radio frequency theory, so learning how radio waves travel between the phone and the tower and then back through the network. The second week, we had we had presentations from each of the carriers. So Verizon came into our training. We learned from the network engineers. Those are the people who design and maintain the network. And we also learned from the records custodians. Those are the people who provide the records to us. The third week, we did drive testing. So I have a piece of equipment I can put in my car. I can drive around a specific cell phone tower, and I can figure out generally how far that tower reaches. And then the fourth week was a moot court exercise where we had a real case. We had to read the records, generate a map, go out and do a drive test, and then testify to it. And at the conclusion of that, I was certified. Now, every year since then, I've attended the CAST recertification course, which is usually 4 days where we go back and meet with all the carriers. We get technology updates. And then because we're located around the country and sometimes in different parts of the world, we do case presentations to each other of what we're seeing in our respective areas.
Okay. And in your role as a CAS supervisor and prior, have you ever been qualified as an expert in court before?
Yes.
How many times?
Over 130 times.
All right. So you've done this a time or two before?
Yes, sir.
All right. When you've been qualified before, specifically what have you been qualified as?
I've been qualified as an expert in historical call detail record analysis and cellular technology.
All right. And, Your Honor, at this time, State would move to, as Mr. Wilde, or excuse me, Agent Wilde, as a expert in historical cell phone location analysis, if I said that correctly, sir.
No objection, Your Honor.
He's so qualified.
All right. And in your role as a CAS supervisor, you became involved in this case, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you can recall approximately when you became involved? And how?
I believe, so I wasn't a supervisor at the time. I was just I was a regular agent, but I was asked in either had to be in July of 2021 to provide some assistance in this case.
Okay. And asked by who?
I believe it was Dylan Hightower.
Okay. All right. And specifically, at least in July of 2021, what did he ask your assistance for?
Well, he had obtained a few sets of call detail records on some of the phones in this case, and there was a question as to whether or not where there was a 911 call that was made, and the tower that was using that 911 the tower that was used to handle that 911 call. There's a question as to whether or not that tower could provide coverage up to Moselle.
Okay. And so there was a question about why the 911 call first bounced off a tower in Hampton
That's correct.
County, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Moselle, to your knowledge, is in what county?
I think it's in Dorchester County.
Or could it be Colleton County?
Colleton County, yes.
And your assistance was asked to help figure out if that was possible. Someone could be in Moselle and a call could bounce off a tower in Hampton,
Yes,
correct? And the CAS team, does it have tools that can assist in figuring that out?
Yeah, we have something called the Gladiator Autonomous Receiver, and it's basically a box that we can put in our car. It's a computer, and it has a couple of receivers in it. And as we drive around, that box maps out the latitude and longitude, so like where we are with the box, and then it measures all the signals from the cell towers that the box can see in its area. It's very much like the old Verizon "Can You Hear Me Now" commercial. It's just doing that hundreds of times a minute. It's just constantly doing that as we drive around.
And just to simplify that a little bit, would it be fair to say that what this tool can do is help you map specifically where cell coverage exists and where it doesn't?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And as you move forward, did you go ahead and conduct that test?
I did. Myself, as well as Dylan Hightower and another agent with the FBI, we grabbed 3 of those pieces of equipment, 3 GARs. We put them in 3 cars. And over 2 days in the beginning of August, we basically drove everywhere all around Moselle, all the way down to Hampton, all the way up to, I believe it's Earhart, and over to 95.
Did you also go on the property at Moselle to take these measurements?
I personally did, yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And afterwards, were you asked to prepare a report and to take all these cell records in and prepare a report and provide this report to show locations of various phones involved in this case?
Yes, it was.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 458. And let's have you take a look at it and see if you recognize it.
Yeah, this is the report that I generated for this case.
All right. And when you say generated, what kind of information did you take in to help you generate that report?
Well, so I had to take in the cell phone records, so the records that were received from Verizon. I had to take those in. I had to also take in the Cellbrite downloads that came from one of the phones. And then I also had to, after we did the drive test, create some maps to kind of show and display that data.
Okay, and for this report specifically, there's a couple of numbers that we don't want read, but whose records did you look at? And for Maggie, Paul, and Alex, you can read their numbers, but whose Verizon records did you look at?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the end of your question.
I'm sorry. Whose Verizon records did you look at?
I looked at Alex's, Paul's, Maggie's, and then there's Marty Cook and CB Rowe.
Okay. And did you prepare a report showing locations off of towers where those various phones were on the days and of and surrounding the murder?
Yeah, I showed the general area where the phones were on the days surrounding the murder.
And you mentioned you got some Cellbrite data on a phone, correct?
Yes,
Do you remember who you got that location information from?
I got that from Britt Dove at SLED.
Okay. And specifically, whose phone whose location data did he provide you?
That was Paul's location data.
All right, and did you plot those locations provided on your report?
I did.
All right, and those would include times as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. At this time, state would move to enter Exhibit 458 in evidence.
No objection, Your Honor.
So admitted.
All right, and Your Honor, the state would move to enter this under seal because there's some phone numbers included. I do have a redacted copy that we're going to publish for now in the jury in the audience.
No objection.
All right. Agent Wilde, I'm going to ask you to step down with the court's permission, and we're going to pull this report up. And this is going to be a little tricky. We got some tight areas to work in, but can you stand in that area there? Give me a moment. Okay. So Agent Wilde, I'm going to hand you this, and I'm going to essentially ask you to start going through this report with the jury to explain to them. I'll probably only interrupt if I feel like something needs to be clarified. You just tell me when you need to click to the next slide, but at this point, I'm going to let you take it away, sir.
All right, so the first slide here, this is just who I am, my case number, and then the telephone numbers involved. So we can go to the next one. The second slide, it just gives a background. So I was asked by SLED to conduct analysis in this case is the first paragraph. Methodology is the second paragraph. So again, I take the call detail records. These are kept by the carriers for billing purposes, for some other technical purposes, but I take these call detail records. I compare the cell tower data on those call detail records to a list of towers. And they tell me whether that phone is in Hampton, whether that phone's in Charleston, whether that phone's in Spartanburg or Greenville. It gives me a general idea where the phone is. And then, so the cell site locations, so the towers can change over time, okay? Just in the last couple of years, we've gone from using 3G to using LTE, and now we're all have the 5G bar on our phone, right? So the tower list change, the towers change. And we get updated tower lists on a regular basis from the carriers. So I use the tower list that was in effect around the time of the incident, so around the time of June 2021. The survey analysis section. So again, we took 3 pieces of equipment and we basically drove everywhere, all the way around the area, trying to record all the signals from the different cell towers. What that gives us is a general area of, it actually maps out the area of where there's coverage from those cell towers and cell sectors. And then, my conclusions, you can go on to the next. So this slide just shows different types of cell phone towers. Okay, I draw your attention to the one on the top left. We have these speaker-looking devices hanging on this tower. Those are the antennas that transmit and receive a signal to and from a phone. Okay, a phone is very much like a car radio. As I drove here today, I tuned into my favorite radio station or my favorite frequency, and somewhere along my route, there's a radio tower. It emits a signal at that frequency. My car radio can receive that signal. I can listen to my favorite station. The major difference between a car radio and a cell phone is that with a cell phone, that information has to go in 2 directions. It has to be able to be received from the tower, but you also need to be able to send that information back to the tower. So those are the antennas that send and receive those signals. The second thing about this is you'll know that you realize those antennas, they hang on a triangular shaped structure. Most of the towers are designed to cover a full circle or 360 degrees. And the way that the carriers accomplish this is by breaking that circle into 3 sides or 3 sectors. So later on in my report, you're going to see these wedge shapes, and I like to just think of the center of that wedge shape as nothing more than the center of one side of this triangle. Going on in a lot of other places, urban, more suburban areas, there's not really room to build like these big towers like this one on the top left. So they start putting them on the sides of buildings. The smaller ones will be on top of light poles in the cities. So just because you don't see it or you don't realize that it's there, it's still there. Another example of that, of course, is my favorite, the pine tree. These are all over the place, and they usually sit about 150 feet taller than all the other trees around them. But at the top, there's these spray painted antennas, and they provide the same service as a regular tower, such as this. Good. All right, so again, the tower is separated into 3, most towers are separated into 3 sides or 3 sectors. When I look at the call detail records, they tell me the tower number, say it's 23. They tell me the sector, say it's 1. What I have to do is I have to go into the tower list, and I have to look up tower number 23, and then I have to look up sector 1. And that tower list is going to tell me which way that sector faces. What I'm looking for there is something called the azimuth or the orientation. Azimuth and orientation are just 2 big scary words for direction. Okay, so if the azimuth is 0, all that means is that side of the tower faces north. Okay, if the azimuth is 180, all that means is the tower faces south. So what I have to do is I will draw a line at 0 if it faces north, and then I'll go 60 degrees in one direction, 60 degrees in the other direction. That gives me 1/3 of that tower, 1/3 of that circle, which is the sector in which the energy is being emitted. You can go on to the next one. So I display that information using this wedge shape. So you can see this is a 120-degree wedge. There's just shaded area in the middle. Okay, just because that shaded area is there doesn't mean the phone has to be within that shaded area. Radio frequency is like light. It's like if I shut all the lights off in this room and I shine a flashlight to the back of the room, it's just going to be emitted in that direction. That's all I'm saying by showing the shaded area, that the energy from that tower is being emitted in that direction. Good. And then this is how I map the sectors on the map. I use that wedge. Each one of these green dots on this map happens to be a cell tower. And so generally the phone's going to be somewhere within this wedge, within the arms of this wedge, but somewhere between the tower that's being used and the next one in that direction, but closer to the one that's being used. Yeah. All right, another set of records that we can get, something called RTT, or timing advance. This is a Verizon case, so the records we have are called RTT records. What RTT records are is it's an estimation of the distance between the phone and the tower at the time that that transaction occurred. All right, so what we get is a regular wedge, like we know which tower, we know which side of the tower is being used, and then Verizon tells us approximately how far the phone is from that tower at the time that it's used. Okay, this is based on like a basic time over distance theory. We know how fast the signals travel. They travel at the speed of light, and then all we have to do is time them from the time it takes to go from the tower to the phone and back to the tower, and then we can estimate the distance. So the phone, when these types of things occur, we have these records. What we're going to have is this hot dog, or this wedge, this shaded wedge here, or this shaded band here, and that phone's going to be somewhere inside that band or just slightly inward from the band.
And would another, could you use another word for that shaded band? Could you call it an arc? Would that
An
be
arc,
accurate?
yes, sir. All right, so now this slide, this is going into the actual case here. So this is showing the legend. So this is where all the locations in this case are located. Starting with the top left one, the top one, the red pin here in the center of the page, that's the address of the crime scene on Moselle Road in Island. Next is the green pin, which is Alameda. And then next is the orange pin. That's 1104. Luray Highway in Hampton, South Carolina. The purple pin is 123 Russell Road in Brunson, South Carolina.
And I'm going to stop you there,
Yes, sir.
and let's go on to the next slide. And one of the things I'm going to ask you to do, Agent Wilde, as you go through some of these, the colors kind of bleed sometimes on these monitors. So the jury may not be able to read some of the place names from where they're at. So each time we go to a different map, if you just kind of provide a general orientation of where, you know, the cities are and some of the roads are.
Okay.
Just so the jury can stay with us, please.
Okay, that works. All right, so this map, I can't read the time frame on the bottom.
Okay. All right, and see, that's cut off on the very bottom there?
Yeah, and
All right.
but it's okay. We'll figure it out. Can I?
Okay,
Yeah,
well, we can
can I
go
use
through the
the-
exhibit.
Okay.
Where's the one I just did? All right, here we go.
You got it.
And I'll keep up.
Okay,
and see
that's
so
fine.
you can see. Okay, so this is,
Thank you so much.
all right, so what's the time frame on
So
this
the
slide?
time frame for this one is June 7th, 4:53 p.m. to 6:09 p.m. And this is the activity for Paul Murdaugh's phone ending in 7845. So the blue pin is the address in Okatee, South Carolina.
Okay, and what times do you show Paul's phone in that general area near Okatee, South Carolina?
So between 5:40 and 6:03, generally in that area.
On the afternoon of what day?
On the afternoon of June 7th.
Okay. All right, and there's several hits off several towers, I
Yeah,
think.
there's some down here, there's some at the bottom, so 453, 511, it's using the tower just south of there, and then 521 through 609, the phone is using the tower north of there.
And just so the jury understands, you know, this is that sector you were talking about a few
Yes, sir.
minutes ago, right? So when the tower pinged off this in this sector at this time, in theory, that phone could be anywhere within this sector, correct?
That's correct, that phone could be anywhere within that sector. It could also be slightly outside of that sector, because those lines, I can't go out to this tower and look up and see those three lines coming off. It's kind of like a fuzzy area between the sectors.
So the sectors aren't hard and fast every time?
Correct.
Okay. But, you know, it's just as, in your general experience, you know, within what range will you usually see a phone ping off a particular tower? What's the general max range? And I know it can vary.
Well, it can vary because it depends on where the phone is. You know, in a rural area, the phone could be 6 to 8 to 10 miles from the tower, and it can use that tower. It just kind of depends on where it is.
Because towers are usually pretty far apart out in rural areas.
In rural areas, I mean, they're set up for population density. So in rural areas, not a lot of population, a lot of foreign land, they're going to be further apart. Whereas if you get closer into the city or suburban areas, they're going to be closer and closer together.
And as a general rule, do cell phones try to connect to the nearest tower, or they have the best signal, correct?
Well, the cell phone tries to connect to the tower and sector it sees as the best signal. That's not always the nearest tower, but most of the time it is.
Oh. And so Paul's phone is in the area of Okatee, starting 5:30 p.m. to about 6:09 p.m. on the afternoon of June 7th. correct?
That's correct.
All right. And just so it's clear for this jury, we say Paul's phone, you can't testify as to who was holding that phone, correct?
That's correct. I have no idea whose hand that phone was in during each one of these calls. All we know is that was the phone that we believe he was using.
But Paul's phone is in these areas during these times?
It is.
Okay. Okay, we'll continue with Paul's phone.
So
and-
this next slide is 6:17 p.m. through 7:30 p.m. And basically at 6:17, the phone is way south down here on the bottom of the page.
And let's do some general orientation here.
All right.
What's this town right here? Can you read that?
Yemassee.
Okay.
Yep.
And this is where?
That's Varnville,
Okay. And that green was again what?
Alameda.
Okay. All right. And red, and this red up here is?
That's the Moselle.
Okay. All right. So what do you see this phone doing during this time frame, starting at 6:24 PM?
Yeah, so between 6:17 and 6:53, it's traveling north from the bottom of the page up to the side and then kind of to the top. And then finally, where it uses sector 1 here at 7:05 and 7:30, it's consistent with being in the area of Moselle.
Okay. And this is just a pinging in this area at 6:24, correct?
Yeah, these are just the phone calls. These are the phone calls that are coming in on the phone. Those are the towers that the phone is selecting as the best tower at that time.
And this general direction seems to be traveling up north, and Okatee would be somewhere down in this area off the map, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's off to the, for the record, off to the right and below where this slide is. And then you see the general progression north towards Moselle, correct?
Yes.
And we see sector 3 here. And what time is it pinging in sector 3, just due south of Moselle?
It's at 6:53 p.m.
Okay. And then we see it switch over to sector 1, which is a north-facing sector, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what time is it in sector 1?
7:05.
Okay.
And then at 7:30, it uses that same sector 1 at a distance of 2.91 miles, which is in
So
the
it's-
area of Moselle.
So it's 7:30, it's somewhere in this arc like we talked about before, correct?
Yes, yes.
The arc, the number provided by Verizon is not necessarily 100% accurate, right?
It's not, because depending on where the phone is, if the phone's out in the middle of the field, 1 mile from the tower, it should register at a mile. But if the phone's in a house, or let's say the phone's in this courtroom, those signals have to go through the exterior walls of the courtroom, hit my phone, then go back out through the exterior walls. And it might slow the signal down, which will make the distance just slightly further.
So it's generally reliable, but not necessarily exactly accurate when you see that RTT distance,
It's
correct?
it's not exactly accurate. That's
Okay.
correct.
All right, but regardless, at 6:53, it's pinging to the south of Moselle in sector 3, and at 7:05, it's pinging in the same sector where Moselle is to the north, correct?
Yes.
And so what inference can you draw, in your opinion, of what the cell phone did between those two times?
Well, between 6:53 and 7:05, I mean, it could have moved from sector 3 to sector 1, or it could have been on the line between sector 3 and sector 1 at that time and just bounced back and forth
But you would agree that generally this direction is towards where?
towards Moselle. Yes, sir.
Okay, and we're on the next slide. And tell us what we see. This is still Paul Murdaugh's phone,
It
correct?
is. This is 7:30 p.m. to 8:40 p.m.
Okay.
So here on the right side of the page, starting at 7:30, there's those activate RTT hits at,
And that was the same from the last
that's the same from the last one,
slide, okay?
right? And then 7:33, there's another RTT hit and a call, or I'm sorry, another RTT hit on this tower to the bottom left. And then where those arcs overlap, when they're in close timing to each other, that's generally where the phone is going to be. And so you can see that the arcs overlap in the area of Moselle.
So by about that time, 7:30 to 7:33, would your opinion be that cell phone's in that area?
It has to be somewhere in the area of Moselle. Yes, sir. And then we have other calls at 8:40, 8:32 and 8:40 on here as well.
Okay, at 8:40, and it pings off of this sector at 8:40?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
correct? And that's sector which off this tower?
That's sector 1 off of that tower.
And again, same direction as Moselle?
Yes.
Okay, and what do we see on this slide?
This is 9:03 p.m. on June 7th. And so here there's a call, and then there's an RTT distance of 3.11 miles.
Okay, and let's just do some general orientation again. The red is what? This red marker is what?
That's Moselle.
Okay, and the green is what?
It's Alameda.
Okay, and then what's this town right here?
That's Varnville.
Okay, all right, and we have it hit at 9:03:22?
Yep.
All right, and and it's off sector what?
It's all sector 3, but again, there could be a little overlap there between sector 3 and sector 1.
Okay.
And so there's a chance, I mean, the phone's likely still in the area of Moselle, it's just using a different sector.
Okay, your opinion is it's likely in the area of Moselle?
Yes. I know for a fact that there's signal from this sector in the
And
area
then
of
we have,
Moselle.
you have a slide to show that?
I should, yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then here we have at 10:34 PM, another hit.
Yes,
And
sir.
again, this is the same map as last time, correct?
It is. 10:34 PM, it's using the same map, just the sectors changed back to sector 1.
All right, and in your opinion, that phone is still pinging?
It's consistent with being in the area of Moselle.
Okay, and now we're transitioning to something else with Paul, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what is this?
This is the iPhone location data that was taken from from the download of his iPhone.
Okay, and we have some times here, and can I go ahead one slide? Because
Sure.
it has more information. It shows a overhead map of the area, correct?
Yes, sir.
And let's talk about this. You've been out to this property, correct?
Yes, I have.
And this is where? What is this called?
That's Moselle.
And what am I pointing at right here in the bottom middle part of the screen?
That's the main house there.
Okay, and then this area up here in the, basically due north of the residence, what is this area?
That's the dog kennel or the hangar.
All right, there's a big hangar building.
Yes,
And
sir.
there's a smaller series of dog kennels right next to the hangar building.
Yes.
correct? Okay. All right, and we have some location data from Paul's phone here, correct?
Yes, we do. So between 7:45 and 7:56, all these circles in and around the road and close to the kennels, that's where the phone is being used. And then at 8 o'clock, there's 2 hits down south of there at 37 and 100 meters.
And we see these red circles. What is that red circle and what does it represent?
So the red circle is it's the area that the phone could potentially be within. The phone shouldn't be any further than, the phone should be where the pin is, but it shouldn't be any further than the exterior of that circle.
So sometimes the GPS information provided by a phone isn't exactly 100% accurate, correct?
Correct.
But it does, the phone information provides information that allows you to determine how accurate the location information is.
It's a level, it's basically a level of accuracy. So if the level of accuracy is like 3-4 meters, I mean, the phone's gonna be within this general area around me. But if the level of accuracy is, let's say, 5,000 meters, that just tells me it's here in town somewhere.
Okay. All right, and we see some of those distances listed in your data here, correct?
Yes, sir.
So at the 7:45:31 hit, we see, and what is this number?
That's the latitude and longitude, so that's like the specific point that the phone returned as where it was located.
And then I see a number next to that. What is that?
That's the radius, so the red circle in meters,
And talking about this again, data point, what does that number say?
48.
48.
Yeah, the 48 meters.
Okay, so from the information side, excuse me, so from, if I understand what you're telling us, is at 7:45:31 PM, the phone is at this lat, within about 48 meters of this lat and long, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, it's, all right. And then, we see some different uncertainty area. So at 7:46:09 PM, there's about 165 meter circle, so that's this much bigger circle.
Yes, sir, it
correct?
is. Yep.
All right, and then we see 52 meters at 7:56:06 PM, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and then you talk about these hits, and down here at 8 o'clock.
Yes.
And we're gonna advance one more slide to show the digital map. The previous slide had the exact same data, correct?
Yes.
All right. So we're still looking at a overhead map, aerial view of Moselle, correct?
Yes. This is 8:04 to 8:05 PM.
Okay, and so now we're seeing some hits across this Moselle Road, correct?
That's correct.
And again, we see the location error value, and it's somewhere within these circles.
It is.
At those times,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Now, we're at 8:06:20 PM, correct?
Yes, sir.
And at 8:06:20, where do we see the phone?
So at 8:06:20, it's here on near Moselle Road, just north of the driveway.
Okay,
And from there, it moves towards the dog kennel or the hangar. It moves towards the dog kennel or the hangar, then kind of up the driveway, and then finally winding up back at the house at about 8:14.
so we see a series of location hits, correct?
Yes, sir.
And looking at the timing, it would appear that the phone moves back through the kennels, correct?
Yes,
And then moves up this road towards the house at the main residence, correct?
yes.
And we see some circles associated with this data, but several of these circles start to get pretty small, correct?
Yes, they are pretty small.
And what are those size of those circles?
20 meters are the final ones that are in and around the house.
And just so I clarify, we see the blue pin, right?
Yes.
And that represents the actual lat long that was recorded by the phone.
Yes, it does.
And the 20 meters means it's almost certainly within that circle.
Yes.
Within that particular pin, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And when you see a series of kind of rapid pings like this within a short period of time, generally, what does that tell you is going on with that cell phone at that time?
Well, the phone's using some kind of application, some kind of map or something that's using its location data.
All right. And then regardless, by 8:08:45 p.m., where is Paul's phone?
It's back at the house.
Okay, and that's got a low error of how big? I'm sorry.
An accuracy of 20 meters.
An accuracy of 20 meters. Okay. And that makes a pretty small circle around the size of that house.
It does.
Correct? Okay. And there's another hit at 8:14 p.m. at the same place? it
Yes, sir.
appears?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, now we moved on. We're still looking at this overhead map of Moselle, and we have some more hits starting at 8:14 and going through to 8:35:07 p.m., correct?
That's correct.
And all these seem to be centered around the residence.
They
correct?
are, yes.
Now, there's some varying degrees of accuracy, correct?
Yeah, there's one that goes up to 165 meters, but most of them are between 20 and 79.
8:35:07 p.m., that phone, Paul's phone, is within 20 meters of the Moselle residence, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and we're going to skip one more slide, just to keep with the digital map.
Yep.
And just so it's clear to the jury, this slide contains the exact same information, correct?
Yes, it does. And then I just switched the map over from a regular street map to the Google Earth map.
Okay. All right, so now we see another series of phone location for Paul's phone. And this is again the night of June 7th, 2021, correct?
Yes.
All right, 8:38:07, where do we see that phone start pinging?
Again, there's a 56 meter hit at right around the dog kennels.
Okay, so by 8:38:07 p.m., that phone's within 56 meters of the dog kennels, correct?
That's correct.
All right, and then we see some more hits. There's a little bit larger of an error starting at 8:44.
Yes.
But then we see a hit at 8:44:55 p.m., and it says media location.
Yeah.
What does that mean, sir?
So in the Cellular report itself, for that record, it came from a movie file. That's where that location was generated from.
Okay, and have you reviewed or seen that video that that location data came from?
Yes, I have.
And just generally speaking, what is that video? Of?
That's the video inside the kennel when Paul's playing with the dog.
Okay, all right. And that video was recorded. The timestamp recorded on the video is 8:44:55, correct?
Yes,
And that matches exactly with the dog kennel, correct?
it does.
And I don't see a number next to that data point. Why don't I see a accuracy number?
Not 100% sure why there's no accuracy number, but we know the video was taken inside the dog kennel because you can see the video. And then the next one right after that, I mean, basically there's records just before at 8:44 and 53 seconds and 8:44 and 56 seconds, and both of those put it in the area of the dog kennel.
And I'm going to skip one more slide here. Excuse me. And we're still looking at this overhead map of Moselle, correct?
Yes, sir.
And we have, looks like a hit location data at 10:18
Yes.
p.m. and at 10:18:03 p.m., correct?
Yes.
And both those are centered on where again?
They're, again, just right there in the vicinity of the dog kennel.
Okay. Now, did you plot every single location data point that you received from Lieutenant Dove?
No, I did not. So between 8:44 and 10:18, there was a series of location data points, but most of them were between like 4,000 and 6,000 or 7,000 meters. So they wouldn't. in my opinion, they weren't super helpful to figuring out exactly where that phone was at that time.
When you see an accuracy of that big or uncertainty of that big, in your opinion, is that location something that can be, is that reliable information?
I mean, not 100% reliable because it is such a huge, area it could be in.
And, going back to the last couple slides, between then and now, between 8:44 p.m. and this 10:18 p.m., did you see any information off of Paul's phone that suggests it went anywhere but stayed at those chemists?
No.
All right, now we're going to move on to Maggie's phone, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. So we're going to rewind back to earlier today, and let's look at this map first of all. What is this map generally of?
This is like the West Ashley area, so just south of Charleston.
Okay. And we see some tower hits in this starting at,
Yeah, about 4:25 p.m. and then ending at about 7:05 p.m. The phone's generally in this West Ashley area.
so Maggie's phone remains in that general area until about 7:05 p.m.
Yes, sir.
All right, and here, okay, this is a bigger map, so let's get oriented. What is this area right here
Yeah, so that's North Charleston that you're circling there.
in Charleston?
And
down here?
Charleston just to the south of that.
Okay.
Yep.
And then out here, what is that red marker again?
The red marker is Moselle, the green marker is Alameda.
All right, and then we see a series of hits with Maggie's phone. You've labeled them, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5?
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And these start at what time?
They start at 7:07 and end at 7:50.
Okay, and so generally speaking, what does this indicate Maggie's phone is doing to you?
It's
during that time?
traveling from the Charleston area west towards Moselle or Alameda.
Okay. All right, and here we have a hit at 7:50 p.m., 7:20 p.m., correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, and where is this?
That's right in Walterboro, actually, right here.
Okay, right here in Walterboro,
Yes,
correct?
sir.
And did you take a look at what appeared to be Maggie's general route from Charleston out towards Moselle during that time?
Yes.
And what road would she most likely have been on to travel that way?
Route 17.
And so that route would have taken her right through the center of Walterboro?
It would have,
And
yes.
I think right out here, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so she's somewhere in this sector at 7:50 p.m., probably right in the middle of Walterboro, correct?
Yes.
All right. And just in your analysis, did you just looking for a rough number here? Did you calculate a rough drive time from here at the center of Walterboro out to Moselle?
Yeah, it was under 30 minutes.
Okay. Roughly 30 minutes,
Roughly
give or
30
take?
minutes,
Okay. And this ping is at 7:20 p.m.,
Yes.
correct? All right. Now, were there any other, did you get any more tower information off of Maggie's phone for the rest of the evening?
No, that 7:50 p.m. was the last tower hit I received that was on the records for Maggie's phone.
Okay. And there were some phone calls to Maggie after 7:50 p.m., correct?
Yes.
But were any of those answered?
No.
Okay. And so you don't have any good tower information for her phone after 7:50 p.m.?
That's correct.
All right, now we moved on, and we're looking at whose phone?
We're looking at Alex's phone.
Okay, and what time frame are we talking about here?
This is 4:10 p.m. to 6:25 p.m.
Okay, let's get oriented here. This is the red marker is what?
Moselle,
And the green marker is what?
Alameda.
Okay, and then the town of, what's this town right here?
Hampton,
Okay,
and Barnville is just south of there.
okay, and we see some hits off these two towers between 4:10 and 6:25 p.m., correct?
Yes.
All right, and are you familiar with the location of the law firm formerly known as PMPED?
Yes,
All right, and is that in the vicinity of Hampton?
it is.
And would that be within these areas that Alex's phone?
Yeah, that would be consistent with the activity on the phone records.
Okay, and that's up until when?
6:25 p.m.
All right, and here we are, the next slide, and again, orientation, green is what?
Alameda,
Red is what?
Moselle.
Okay. And what information do we see here?
Here we have a number of calls between 6:40 and 9:10 p.m. and they're all using tower 159263.
And that's
That's
this
the one
tower?
shown, which faces north and is consistent with being in the area of the Moselle property.
So starting at 6:40 PM, you see him north in this sector, which is the sector where Moselle is.
Yes, sir.
All right. So here we are. Let me go back. And these rest of these phone calls ping in the same sector up until 9:10:47, correct?
Yes.
All right. And now, what time frame are we talking about with this slide?
Now we're looking at 9:12 to 9:18.
Okay. And in the 912 phone record, where does Alex's cell phone ping? What sector?
Uses sector 3 on tower 159263, which is the one closest to Moselle.
All right, so somewhere south or close to the border of this tower, correct?
Yes.
And then at 9:18 PM, we see a ping off of this tower, correct?
Yes, off of 159217, which is closer to Varnville.
And it would be in the north, most likely in the north side of that.
Yes.
Tower, correct? Okay? All right, and now this is the same two calls, correct?
It is.
All right, but now I see some, looks like some shaded overlay over this. I'm gonna give this back to you.
Okay.
What is that shaded overlay? What does it mean?
So the shaded overlay is the coverage area that we're able to determine from doing that drive test with our equipment. And so basically we had to drive everything all around these addresses and then go back and look at the data, and then it creates these bubbles that show us where the coverage, where the equipment saw that tower in that sector. And so here you can see that at 912, it's using the sector, it's kind of highlighted in green. And then at 918, it uses this one at the bottom, 159217, that's in pink.
Okay. And so what your drive test found is, you know, you kind of described those neat sectors at the beginning, but in reality, they're kind of more messy, correct?
There are a lot more messy.
And from what you found from the actual field testing is you could get coverage off this tower in, looks like it's just south of Varnville, anywhere in this pink area.
Yes, sir. Yep.
And that's in that particular sector. What sector is that again?
That's sector 1.
All right. And then this green area, you could be anywhere in this green area and potentially be getting coverage from this tower up north towards Moselle.
Yes.
And now, there's some overlap, though.
There
between
is.
those, correct? So there's some areas where a phone could potentially connect to either tower, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And,
But in 2 minutes, I mean, the calls are 6 minutes apart.
Right.
So, I mean, within 6 minutes, the phone used both of these sectors at the same time.
okay. And just as a final point, again, the sectors aren't exactly black and white, neatly drawn, correct?
Correct.
And so in reality, like this little green corner above this tower, a phone could be in that area and still be pinging off this sector
Yes.
of the tower.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
And this coverage is something that, you told the jury about the drive test, correct?
Yes.
And that's when you guys went out with actual equipment to measure the coverage in all these areas, correct?
Yes, sir. We drove all these roads, and again, that equipment, every few seconds, it's recording the GPS point, and then it's measuring the signal level from all the towers and sectors in that area. And then what I do is I go in and I can read the tower and sector that was used by looking at the call detail records, and I can go in and select the coverage area or this blob for that tower and sector.
So let's go on to the next slide. And we see now, we have some information starting at what, 9:20:34, correct?
Yes, sir. So at 9:20, from 9:20 to 9:46, there's a handful of calls, all using tower 159217, but using sector 2 that kind of faces towards the Alameda address.
Okay.
And then there's also one RTT hit at 9:34 at about 2.09 miles, which is consistent with being in the area of the Alameda residents.
Okay. And that starts at, that phone's within this sector, it's starting at what time?
9:20,
Okay, and it, last phone call in that sector is at what time?
9:46.
And Almeda's in that sector, correct?
It is.
But if a car were driving up this road towards Varnville, and I believe that's Highway 378, or 278,
Yes.
excuse me, that's still in that same sector, correct?
It is,
So
yes.
if someone's in a vehicle on that 278, right there in that sector, you would get the same information?
Yes.
So, so at 9:46, if a car has already left Alameda and we're on 278, it would still ping that same.
It should, yes.
All right, we'll go on to the next slide. And this is still Alex's phone, correct?
It is. It's just a zoomed in version of the last slide.
Okay, so it's the same information, but looking closer, and I probably should have made some of those points on this one, but we see that road 278 here, correct?
Yes, sir.
Within that sector, and there's Alameda, it's also in the same sector, correct?
It is.
All right, and so, in theory, unless, for the RTT hit at 9:34, the phone could be anywhere in this arc,
It
correct?
could be anywhere in that arc.
And for the rest of these hits, it could be anywhere within this whole sector.
It could be anywhere between this tower and sector and the next one in that direction.
Okay. Okay. All right, we'll go back. This is the next slide, and this is again, Alex Murdaugh's phone, correct?
Yes, it is.
All right, and we see some hits starting at 9:52:59 PM, correct?
Yes, sir. So 9:52:59, the phone's using the sector with the 240 in it. So it's not using the one that faces towards Alameda yet. I'm sorry, towards Moselle yet.
Yep, and the red, and what's the red
It's Moselle,
and the green?
is Alameda.
Okay, so just in the previous slide, we saw the phone down here in the area of Alameda, correct?
Yeah, it was using that tower near Alameda, but facing Alameda.
And by 9:52 PM, 59 PM, Alex's phone is pinging off of this tower right by Varnville, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat your
This,
question?
which
No,
tower?
at 9:52 and 9:53, the phone is using the tower closer to Moselle,
Okay.
but on the sector facing towards
Okay,
Varnville.
all right. And then we have a 10:06 hit, 31, correct?
Yes, sir.
And do you recall what particular phone call was placed from Alex's phone at 10:06 and 31?
That was the 911 call.
All right. And it hits off of which tower?
It hits off of the tower closer to Varnville.
Okay. But then at 10:17, there's another hit with Alex's phone. And which sector is it pinging off at
That's
10:17?
that's using the zero azimuth, so sector 1 that faces towards Moselle.
So that initial 911 call hit off this tower way down here by Varnville,
It
correct?
did.
All right. And that was one of the reasons you were called in to help figure out why that happened, correct?
I was, and I figured out why it happened. It's because, so in radio frequency, the higher the frequency, the shorter the distance that it can travel. The lower the frequency, the longer it can travel. So on this tower, there's two different sets of sectors, and one is at a higher frequency, and one is at a lower frequency. So this call here happened on a lower frequency, and therefore the signal can travel slightly further.
Okay, so it's, in your opinion, it's consistent the phone could have been up here at Moselle at the time of that 10:06 911 call.
It could have been, yes.
Right, next slide. All right, and we're going to come up on them in a little bit. Do you have some more detailed maps showing the actual coverage? Actually,
Yeah, I think this
this
is
is
it.
it.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
All right, so what information do we see on this slide?
So this is the tower and sector being used at 9:52 and 9:53. And again, this blob shape here, that's the coverage area for that tower. And so you can see that it's mostly in the center here, but there are some dots out, but most of it kind of faces towards Varnville.
Okay, and the calls at 9:52, 9:53 occurred somewhere within this sector, correct?
Yes, they did.
And that line with the slightly shaded area represents the actual real coverage that you went out and measured where that phone could have been during that time.
That's correct.
Next slide. All right, and we zoomed in here, correct?
Yeah, so we zoomed in, again, now we're zoomed in kind of on the Moselle property, and just showing that there's a couple little specks of coverage there from this tower and sector
And again-
on that property.
Which tower is this? This is the tower that's closest to Moselle.
It is, yes.
But you do actually see some actual coverage area right there on the
Yes.
corner. And the red is right there, correct?
Yes, the red is Moselle.
Next slide. Okay, and here we are, we're zoomed back out. Again, red is Moselle, and this is that tower just down south of Varnville, correct?
It is. So that's the tower south of Varnville, or near Varnville, facing north. And this is for the 911 call, again, on that lower frequency. So the signal goes a lot further. Actually, there's little specks all the way up here near Anston.
Okay, so this is Varnville, this is Moselle, and this is the coverage that you actually went up, and measured in with real equipment.
Yes, sir.
And you've determined all these shaded pink areas, if a phone could get coverage in this tower sector in those pink areas.
Yes,
And we see some of that pink area up right by Moselle, correct?
we did, yes.
Next slide. All right, and this is a 1017 ping, correct?
Yes,
All right, and it's in that sector, now we're back to the tower that's closest to Moselle, correct?
it is.
And that's that north-facing sector.
Yes, it is.
Next slide. Next slide. All right, and here we see, again, that 911 call at 10:06:31 PM, correct?
Yes, sir.
That originally pinged off of this Varnville tower, correct?
Yes,
But we see, this is the two coverages overlaid between these two towers that both have coverage at Moselle, correct?
yes, it did.
And you see some of that pink from that Varnville tower up right on the Moselle property, correct?
Yes,
But you see more from the green from this tower sector that covers that same tower.
that's correct.
So, go ahead. Next slide. And here we're zoomed in, correct?
Yeah, we're zoomed in now, and now we have both of the coverages showing. So we're showing the pink, which is from that tower down by Varnville facing north, and then the green, which is from the tower right here close to Moselle, also facing north. And you can see there's coverage from both of those towers actually in the area of the kennels.
Okay. And in your opinion, that phone could have been right in that area for both these phone calls at 10:06 and 10:17 PM?
Yes,
And that's Alex's phone, correct?
yes.
And it does appear there's more coverage from the green sector off of this closer tower, though, correct?
There is.
Excellent. Okay, and this is just the remainder of the night for Alex's phone, correct?
It is, again, 10:19 to 11:18 PM. And the phone mostly uses that tower closest to Moselle. There is another hit at 10:21 on the tower near Varnville.
Next slide. All right, and then continuing, what's the date on,
So
this is the next day at 6/8,
Yes.
correct?
So this is June 8th, starting at 6:31 a.m., ending at 8:54 a.m., and the phone's using the tower and sector consistent with being in the area of Almeida.
Okay, so this is the morning after the murders, correct?
It is.
All right. Next slide. And this is continuing the same, this is the next day, June 9th of 2020.
It is, and same tower, same sector, time period is 7:52 a.m. to 8:36 a.m.
Next slide. All right, and here we see some information from June 10th of 2021, correct?
Yes, sir, from 3:32 a.m. to 8:49 a.m. Basically using the same tower and sector here, just to the left of Almeida, except for this one RTT hit at 3:32 in the morning, where that band overlays on top of the Almeida address.
Okay. Next slide. And now we're on June 11th for Alex's phone, correct?
Yes, again, in the morning, 3:52 a.m. to 8:15 a.m., and it's using the tower and sector consistent with being in the area of Almeida.
Next slide. And this is June 12th of 2021?
Yep, 1:41 a.m. to 8:14 a.m., again, using that same tower and sector near Almeida.
Okay. Next slide, please. June 13th of 2021 for Alex's phone, correct?
Yep, first call in the morning is at 9:09 a.m., and again, using the same tower and sector consistent with Almeida.
Okay. Next slide. Now we're on June 14th, correct?
Yes, sir.
And what are the times do we see these pings?
12:04 a.m., and then 9:53 and 9:55 a.m., again, using that same tower and sector consistent with Alameda.
Did you see any phone calls from Alex's phone between 12 a.m. and 9:53 that you're able to get tower information
No.
on that day?
No, sir.
Next slide. This is June 14th, later in the day, correct?
It is 10:27 to 12:29 p.m. Or 10:27 a.m. to 12:29 p.m. And now it's using the tower facing north out of Warrenville, but also using the tower facing into Hampton.
Next slide. All right, and this is June 14th, continued. And does that
Yes.
phone remain in the area of Alameda the rest of June 14th, at least until 4:26 p.m.?
Yes.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then here we're on June 14th.
Yep.
And starting at 4:33 p.m. up to 6:08 p.m., where do we see Alex's phone move generally?
It moves generally from there just south of Alameda over towards Charleston.
And that's this area up here. And it's specifically, I don't know if you can read it, but what is that there? Can you read that place name where that last tower is on the map?
Is it Somerville?
Does that say Somerville?
I think so.
All right, next slide. Okay, June 14th continued.
Yes.
And this is up in the area of the same Somerville, correct?
Yeah, this is in the area of Somerville, so between 6:08 p.m. on the 14th and 8:10 a.m. on the 15th, all the calls hit that tower and sector in Somerville.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then on June, later that, June 15th, what do we see the phone do on June 15th?
It travels from Somerville back to Hampton between 8:10 a.m. and 11:40 a.m.
Okay, next slide. All right, and then now we're on June 15th for Alex's phone, and what two towers is his phone pinging off of for most of the day?
Again, the one in Varnville facing north and the one in Hampton facing towards Varnville.
Okay, next slide. And then June 15th, and this phone is consistent with the remaining in the area of Alameda during those times, correct?
Yes.
And those are 12:35 p.m. to 2:33 p.m., correct?
Yes.
Next slide. Okay, and just real quickly for these last three slides, you also reviewed the records of C.B. Rowe and Marty Cook, correct?
Yes,
And you reviewed them for the night of the murders, correct?
I did.
And in your opinion, from the information you could see from their call records and their tower information, were either of those phones in the vicinity of the murder location between 8:50 p.m. and 9 p.m.?
No.
All right. Nothing further from the state.
So I'll stand for a moment. For a break.